Alright guys, you got your boy Stingren here today, and today we're back with some reverse 1999 content for you guys here today. And today we are going to be going over some of the best 50-50 losses that you can have in this game. Now the reason why I wanted to go make this video is because there's a lot of obvious us now pulling, especially in the Assassin's Creed collab. A lot of us are pulling on just like the yearning banner to maybe get one of those new Euphoria characters. And of course, with all that, that means you might potentially lose and you may not get the on banner character. So I'm going to be doing a video like this. I'm going to be making a separate video for Euphorias, because for Euphorias you technically would have to have already have gotten the character. And of course that requires further investment, which, you know, some newbies can't do. So I figured I'd probably just leave Euphorias out, and I'm going to be focusing on mainly units you can get with a good enough base kit. Now, if the unit is mentioned and has a Euphoria, that means that the unit was at least usable on base kit, and of course Euphoria makes them better. So without further ado, we're going to talk about every unit that's potentially a great loss for you, starting from the beginning of the game all the way up to where we are currently, to where you can get a 50-50 unit, which is patch 2.4. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first character that we're going to be talking about is going to be none other than Flutterpage. Flutterpage is arguably one of the best supports you can ever hope to lose for in this game. If you, of course, you can try to pull her in the Yearning banner, which I really don't recommend, because again, you're potentially fighting her rate up with another character. But for a newbie, if you were to get Flutterpage, consider yourself golden. Consider yourself a consider yourself some type of luck lord. Okay, if you were pulling for Ezio and then you ended up getting Flutterpage instead of you getting your Ezio, consider yourself a luck lord. Okay, you might want to put a crown on your head at that point, because Flutterpage is genuinely one of the best supports in this entire game. She provides you with one of the more rarer buffs, which is continuous action, which gives you an additional AP for the round, which is very, very important. This is really good because 3-man team comps become a lot more comfortable when you're progressing through story, or limbo when there's 3-man stages in limbo. 4-man comps for like the end game or mid game stuff, like the later stages of limbo, or, you know, final boss stages in story. Like, you get 5 actions and that gets you so much of an extra bonus. Not to also mention her special stacking effect off of her gust, which gives you additional damage over time depending on how much stacks of gust that she has. She can give you a lot of damage dealt up and a lot of Genesis damage boost. This is also very relevant for someone like Ezio, because Ezio loves having Genesis damage on his poison build specifically. So this is a great pickup if you ended up losing to her. Of course, if you did try to tempt fate and go for the Yearning banner, that's also still good, because again, you ended up getting the character here. But still, I do think that Flutter is genuinely one of the best units you can ever pick up in terms of being a support. She is really good for follow-up, she's really good as a general support, and she's just overall a fantastic character. So that will be the main reason why I really recommend Flutter over, you know, well, of course, if you do lose, I can't really recommend, but Flutterpage is, again, top 10 supports in the entire game. Probably like top 3, I'd probably say. I'd probably say top 3 supports in the game. Definitely Flutterpage is in that list. So, yeah. Flutterpage, insane pickup. Alright, so the unit that we're going to start with is going to be none other than Fatutu. Fatutu is an incredible unit to lose to. She's actually one of the newest characters to be added to the general pool as of 2.7. But the real reason why Fatutu is such a good loss is because she's, quite frankly, one of the best sustains in the game. And again, an incredible support for follow-up teams. Now, while follow-up is probably the most common archetype in the game, so don't be surprised if you see a lot of units that have quote-unquote follow-up built into their kit, which of course, again, Ezio does like. But one of the things that she does provide that provides a great amount of damage potential is her unique Spirit Shell debuff, which is whenever they are attacked with an extra action, you get damage dealt and critical damage plus 5% for each shell. So you can get a lot of this because you can put a lot of spirit shells on the enemy. You can get a max of about 12 shells on an enemy, which puts up a lot. That's a lot of critical damage and damage delta bonus that the unit can actually take, which of course someone like Ezio, who has a lot of built-in crit on his crit technique and critical damage bonuses from his attacks, would absolutely love. So if you did end up getting Fatutu from a loss, consider yourself again a golden winner, because this is again one of the best units in the game. She also has a incredible heal off of her Ocean and the Sail skill. If you do this skill, depending on the amount of spirit shells that is on the enemy, she retrieves them all, and then she will of course heal based on the amount of spirit shells that she obtained. And she can provide some really strong AoE healing. I've seen numbers up to anywhere to 6 to 8k, or even high as 10k on an AoE heal, which of course at this time isn't really something you see all that much. You don't really just see 10k heals popping out of the wazoo like they do. So for what it's worth, this is really good. Also, what this Ocean in the Cells does, what the skill does, is it allows for damage to be split across your team. This is actually pretty good because this allows your team to really be safe against enemies that can have hard-hitting single target or hard-hitting AoEs that don't hit all enemies. For example, if it's a 2-hitting AoE skill, like if you hit 2 of your enemies, it's going to be split across all 4 of your allies, which basically ensures that you have a better chance to survive because it's being split and reduced amongst other units. So that's a really good thing there as well. So for the most part, I do think that Fatutu is an incredible pickup for you. She does also have built-in follow-up after allies trigger set amount of follow-up. She can follow up with her skill. She also has really good mox recovery, so she can get into her ult quite consistently. It's not going to be like, you know, every turn or anything, but it's going to be at least decent enough for you to point to where you can at least get some good use out of it. She does have a pretty hard-hitting single target ult, 7% modifier. So it's, you know, not nothing, you know, explosive, because she herself isn't really a DPS. But you really want Fatutu, of course, for the enabling of extra damage on follow-up teams, the ability to be a really good healer, and of course, that pressure with spirit shells. So, for what it's worth, really good support and really good heals from this character. So, yeah. Alright, so the next unit that we're going to be recommending is going to be Tuesday. I'm recommending Tuesday simply because of Ezio himself. Now, if you guys don't know, the whole core of Ezio's poison team starts with Tuesday. The biggest reason why is because Tuesday provides a exceptional a lot of poison stacking. She can also make enemies weaker to Genesis damage, which is going to be your main damaging output when using Ezio. And she is probably the biggest enabler for the team. An overall purpose for poison currently, Tuesday is a mandatory unit on most of the current poison teams in the game. While the only current DPS now would have been Willow, obviously Ezio now is the newest and strongest DPS of the poison team. He needs Tuesday because you want better stack generation. With the combination of Ezio doing riposte or even just attacking into the enemy, plus Tuesday's skills, you're very easily going to be able to build up enough stacks to trigger his extra effects when enemies have a certain amount of stacks of poison, which of course is good. Another incredible bonus that Tuesday does provide is her special array field, which comes from her ultimate, which is called Please Come On In, is going to be the key thing that's going to enable the DPS even further. What this does is it basically prevents all stacks of poison from dropping to 0, which would mean that they would normally resolve. In this particular case, while this array field is active, those stacks of poison stay, which is really nice. This basically means that you will always have those stacks of poison while the array field is active. You can pop this, get the stacks up, and then Ezio's going to deal some incredible numbers off of his Genesis attacks. I mean, he will still hit some high numbers even if you don't trigger this effect, but it's going to be even more because you're going to have more stacks to build up over the course of the array. And then if you can even get ult when this array field is active, you can see some disastrous numbers. I've seen a lot of numbers. I've seen 700, 800Ks in Genesis damage. Obviously, this is because P5, but P0, I've seen 2 to 300K worth of Genesis damage, which is going to be incredible. But in terms of her being a normal lost 50/50 for the course of just being a overall good unit, I wouldn't say Tuesday makes that list because again, she's more so enabling for poison teams, and as a newbie, you probably if you don't have Ezio, then you don't really have a poison team. Like I mean, unless you lose into like a Jessica or lose into a Willow, then yeah, sure, then Tuesday becomes a great option for you. But in terms of just it being like your first 50/50 loss, or you only just pulled Ezio, that's it, then nah, Tuesday's not a good option. But if you were going in with the plan to pull Ezio because ooh cool character collab, or you do like Assassin's Creed, or you of course want the character because he's really strong, then yeah, Tuesday will then be a good 50/50 loss. So that's why I decided to put her on this list. So let's go on to the next unit. Alright, so the next unit I recommend is actually going to be Mercuria and by extension Lopera. Now, whenever you hear me talk about best teams, you will always hear me say either put Mercuria or Lopera in the team. Always. Really just because they're both good sources of crit rate, crit damage buffers, which of course is the lifeline of this game when it comes to mandatory buffs. Now, of course, some teams don't necessarily care about crit rate, crit damage, but most teams care about critical rate, critical damage as your main sources of stacking up extra hitting damage, because critical damage is weighed heavily in this game. So, if you were to hit either Lopera or Mercuria, consider yourself again a really lucky person. It really just depends on which is better for your account. For Ezio specifically, either or works really well. The difference being that Lopera does inch out a bit better because she provides you with 40% crit rate, and since Ezio himself can naturally build up to 100% crit rate because of his very high crit technique, and you get him to like R12, which of course is something you can do over the course of time. You don't have to do that immediately for people who are new to the game. Again, I recommend stopping at R10. Then you simply can get a good unit that's functional out of the gate. So if you did pull Lopera, specifically if you were looking to see if that was a good pairing for Ezio, that's again a better option overall than Mercuria. Another really good option another really good reason that Lopera will be a really good option for Ezio is because she also provides ultimate might support when Mercuria doesn't. But let's also talk about why Mercuria would also be a really good option. One really good synergy that she does have is that she synergizes very well with follow-up targets, or specifically targets who can cast multiple incantations skills. And of course, Ezio can do that quite frequently. He can follow up with a skill that is considered as an incantation, which will trigger her stacking effect, which is called Cosmic Energy. And Cosmic Energy will grant extra damage dealt up, which is really good. And once she reaches certain stacks of her Cosmic Energy, she grants you specific buffs. This case being critical damage and incantation might, which of course is really nice. This is pretty much a good amplify for in general any DPS in the game, honestly. So Mercuria would work with basically everyone. She works with everyone. So it doesn't necessarily matter who or what, even if you pulled Mercuria and you don't want to use her with Ezio, maybe another DPS that comes along and you could use Mercuria for that, you know what I mean? So for what it's worth, I do think she's a fantastic pickup. She unfortunately doesn't have access to her signature cube, which is one with the flow that comes from her antidote event, which does suck because her at P0 can be a little bit annoying to play because you want to have the ability to consistently get into her ult, because you want to have the ability to have higher tier incantations, which of course means more cosmic energy for yourself. So that's a little bit of an annoyance because her one with the flow antidote cube actually does fix this issue somewhat. Of course, it's not guaranteed to give you +1 moxie every single turn, but it's 48% chance, which is, basically 50/50 every round, which is, not bad. That helps overall. That helps. So, but for what it's worth, I do recommend either her or Lopera. I put them in the same kind of section together. I don't have Lopera in my account, unfortunately, so I can't really show you Lopera, but fundamentally, you're just going to be cycling through them both in most of your teams. You're either going to run Lopera for the extra critical rate on her array field, the either ultimate might or incantation might bonus, and the crit rate damage, or you're going to be running Mercuria for the exact same critical rate, critical damage, of course, varying differences between the two, incantation might bonus and damage delta. It really just is what you personally prefer off of the team itself. So both of them usually are interchangeable with most teams in the game. So for what it's worth, either Mercuria or Lepera would both be fantastic pickups for you. Alright, so the next unit here is going to be none other than Kakania. Kakania is a really good mitigator for the team. Basically what she does is she takes damage for the team based off of her total empathy. So what this basically does is empathy acts as a bit of a stack measuring for how much damage she can take for the team. Over the course of time, you will take a damage, and basically she will be able to absorb that damage and of course protect her team from death, protect her team from fatal attacks and everything, which is pretty cool. But one thing you have to pay very close attention to when playing Kakania is how high is the empathy stack is. Now of course it is based off your max HP. Most people will recommend you to take her to R15, but again, if you're a new player, don't do that. I do recommend getting her resonance chain though. Make sure you get the overindulgence pattern. This is something you can do maybe later on once you're kind of done building out your team, like your first team, and you're kind of cruising. At this point, I do recommend this over most things. Now, resonance patterns is completely optional. It's just good. It's just better for, stat flexing and just kind of fixing up numbers for certain characters. But I do think it's very important for you to give Kakania as much HP as you can possibly give her, because you want to have as high empathy stack as you possibly can, because not only does this help her ultimate, because it's based off of how much empathy she has times 1000% of Genesis damage, but she can hit for some pretty respectable numbers, so it does have a bit of a strong burst tied to it, especially if you dump it when she's at max empathy. But it also allows her to mitigate the damage for your team a lot longer. If she doesn't have high HP, she won't have high stacks of empathy or the high gauge amount for empathy. So make sure if you were to get her and you look to invest her for more so like mid to end game level, make sure you try to give her anything that can help her HP. So you want to give her a build that focuses on HP. You want to get her pattern, which gives her a lot of HP. Obviously this is because this is at max, so this is going to look a lot different at R10. But you want to give her a cube that can give her some HP. Of course, her own cube will obviously be the best option, but it's just the general kind of things you'd want for HP. And you want to do that because you want to keep her alive so she can do the things she can do. Another really cool thing that Kakania does have is that she also has access to a flat attack buff, which is something that not a lot of units give. A flat attack buff is actually a really rare buff in this game. Most things, if anything, most times it's probably attack percent boost, but having a direct flat attack boost is actually pretty strong, and that also can help Ezio too, because it's gonna help his extra damage from attacks just hit a little bit harder because it's extra flat attack tied to it. So I mean, for what it's worth, pretty good for him. But of course, you can also use this on herself to heal herself. So after you take a lot of damage for one round, you still have some empathy that you can gain, so that way you can keep yourself mitigating. You just pop the skill to self and then you get like a heal. And the really cool thing about Kakania's heal is that her heals are percentage based. As you can see, uses max HP times 40% of her own HP. So she can really get some really strong heals to herself to keep herself topped up. And of course, you can always run her with another healer. You can run her if you do run into one like later on. So what it's worth, Kakania, really good unit you can lose to. So let's go over to the next unit. Next unit I'm going to be recommending is going to be Vila. Vila also gets a very strong recommendation because her base kit, even before Euphoria, is actually quite good. She does face a bit of an issue with being a end game healer, specifically without her Euphoria, and that is the whole kind of thing with her ultimate. Vila's biggest problem, like before her Euphoria, was ultimate issue. The issue with her ultimate is that you can't get another ultimate, which is you can't loop her ultimate. So that means you have to always get into ultimate, get out of the ultimate, wait a turn, then ultimate again. And if you're looking at in-game content that can hit you really hard, like reveries, mains, bulletin, those type of things, that is potentially the difference between life and death, depending on like how far you are in mains bulletin. Like if you're not super far in a mains bulletin, it is not that big of an issue. But if it's like reveries, it could potentially be an instant wipe on your team, because Vila wants to be an ult for as long as she possibly can, because a lot of her skills are enhanced when in ult. When in ult, she gets a much stronger heal that can heal up to 3 different targets instead of 1 target and provide them all Genesis damage. When in ultimate, this song is improved from Song of Generosity, which only gives you crit rate, crit damage. Now it gives you crit rate, crit damage, and additional modifier to your skills for up to 200% extra modifier for that skill. And that's absolutely strong. You want these bonuses on her on most occasions. Her being in her base form isn't super great, right? With her Euphoria, if you do happen to get this, it fixes so many of the issues with her. But I will not dismiss the fact that Vila was considered as one of the best healers in the game for the time when she did release. Now, obviously, she's since fallen off because like Fatutu exists. Fatutu's a really good healer. Kakania also kind of can creep up on really good healing on herself specifically, and of course keeping her team alive. You know, really just it's really just more so Fatutu that was kind of like the dominant of healing. So for what it's worth, that is the case. But for Euphoria's sake, I would say that Vila comes back quite comfortably as a really good healer all over again. She's definitely going to be able to keep you surviving in the end game when the end game content is considered. Once you're able to get her Euphoria, once you're able to unlock this, you're kind of good. You're kind of good. And of course, you have a healer that can be put on any team. And if you happen to get a mental DPS, they of course get better benefits from Vila, which is absolutely great. So for what it's worth, I would 100% recommend getting Vila if you could as a lost 50-50 unit. I would be happy about getting this unit because she is still relevant in today's content even before Euphoria. And of course, Euphoria does fix a lot of her problems. The last unit I'm going to be talking about is going to be Isolde. Now, Isolde is kind of the more lower end, but if you're going specifically for Ezio, there's a few bonuses that Isolde does provide for him that actually wants her to actually be used in the team. Not only is she a good trigger for follow-up because she does have a built-in follow-up attack based on stacks and burn, but she's also a good buffer as well. With her special stacking mechanic, when she accumulates heat stacks, which is basically off of her inheritances, she can give everyone 3 stacks of pre-ignition, which basically means whenever they attack into the target, you put those stacks onto the enemy. If you don't, then you get 3 additional stacks, which you put 6 stacks. Simply put, she could put a lot of burn stacks on enemies simply by herself, so she can technically be considered as an enabler for burn teams, but burn is definitely not a great status as like poison is currently due to Ezio support. But if you build up these stacks of burn and you build this up continuously over time, she gets special effects. So she basically goes from like her normal status to interlude to finale. Finale is what you want to focus on the most, because finale, every single time that you start a round, you get a stack of power burst, which gives you 25% damage bonus for a stacking effect. This is really good because this kind of forces Ezio to have a stronger like one hit of riposte, which is pretty nice, or even just a stronger hit of his first skill if you really wanted to use it for that. Her ultimate can give you a stack of rousing morale, which is an additional 50% damage bonus. So for what it's worth, she can provide you up to 75% damage bonus, which is really, really good. Now, the only unfortunate thing is that it's only based on stack and it's not a permanent thing. So this isn't like you get 75% damage delta for 2-3 turns or whatever have you. So that's the unfortunate thing. But the other additional bonus that makes Isolde at least appealing to Ezio is that she's a reality debuffer who can also debuff critical defense as well, since Ezio himself is a reality-based attacker who also loves having enemies with weakened critical defense, so he can make good use of his basically almost essential critical hits on every skill. This is a good debuff for him to utilize, and this of course is tied to AoE as opposed to Argus, who was only single target. So again, really good option for him just to have a good debuffer for team purposes. This will probably go along with his follow-up team or even just ultimate if you wanted to have it for that. So for what it's worth, Isolde is not a terrible pickup for him. She's a bit on the lower end. I wouldn't be as excited to pick up Isolde for Ezio if I were a newer player, but I say, oh, at least I have something that I can use with him. I think that's the general understanding that you should go into when if you were to lose to Isolde. It's like, oh, at least I have a good partner for him, and that's kind of the thing that I'd recommend with saying this. But anyway, I think that is going to be generally all the units that I recommend with a good base kit for Euphoria recommendation. That is generally what I'd recommend. But if you have any other recommendations, let me know in the comment section below. I love to know what you think is good, potential 50-50 losses and what synergy they can provide. And I'll see you guys next time. Peace.